I'm a dreamer. I'm always thinking.
Which way are things going to go? It's been kind of stagnant.
I mean, we're the freaking United States. We're not going anywhere.
I would have probably treated COVID in a different way. Welcome to the Invest This podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bauer. I've been a real estate investor here in Phoenix for over 12 years, doing everything from wholesaling to fix and flips and apartment syndications. But the reason I started this podcast is because I believe that investing is about more than the money. Whether that's how to get closer to your family, to become a better leader, or to be more intentional with your health, I'm always trying to improve. My goal for this episode is that you get one thing that you can immediately invest in your life or business to get at least 1% better. So happy that you're here. Now let's get into it. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Invest This podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bauer, and I'm excited today because we have my buddy Jared Vidales here. We're going to talk about some real stuff in real estate. We're going to talk about probably more than real estate, though. We're going to talk about some health. We're going to talk about some fitness. We're going to talk about how it all kind of correlates. Jared, why don't you give the listeners a little bit more about your background, who you are, what you're focused on now, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. My name is Jared Vidales. Obviously, we're out here in the hot Phoenix, Arizona market. Man, I pretty much do everything residential, flip, direct-to-owner acquisitions, MLS acquisitions. But from like an operational standpoint, we flip, we wholesale. We have a $30 million rental portfolio. We sell homes on seller financing. We do lease options. We do everything. It just depends on, for us, we do what is right for the asset. We're exit strategy agnostic.
Let's kind of go into like your personal side first, right? I'm really big on my morning routine, and I'm sure you are too. What does your morning routine look like?
Good question. My morning routine has transformed so many different times over a course of 10 years. But, I started off, way back in the day, like I had to be up at 4:45 to start my day, get ahead of the curve, right? Because you don't want to wake up. Everything's chaos around you and you're constantly catching up. But like over time, really, like I just really got to learn like what was important to me. And so I don't wake up at 4:30 anymore. I wake up at, 5:30, 5:45. And the biggest thing for me is if I'm not working out with my personal trainer that day, what I'll do is, and this is my new routine, it's freaking amazing. So I'm not going to say the cross streets. So I'll go and run. So I have this little canal behind my house. So I'll go run to the gym. It's about 2.5 miles. I'll get like a 30-40 minute workout session. Then I'll run to this little boutique coffee shop, grab a nice coffee, and I'll walk 2.5 miles home through the Arcadia neighborhoods. Get some sun, you see the moms walking, people jogging, everybody's like super happy, and it's like perfect weather out here in Phoenix right now.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to be able to do this in the next couple months, but it's just like good vibes, sunshine, get a little tan, get my coffee in, take some phone calls here and there. But really it's a time for me just to think about my day. What do I have to do that day? And just deep thought, because a lot of what I do and a lot of how I come up with the ideas that I do is just always being in deep thought and just kind of wrapping my head around, business, personal, and pretty much everything in between.
That's so interesting. Like a lot of people that are very successful, a lot of books that you read always talk about thinking time. A lot of people plan this out in their day, right? You have to time block it in your calendar to make sure that you spend time to think. Because in every entrepreneur's lifestyle or in every entrepreneur's life, there's an endless list of stuff to do constantly. And so if you don't block it off, then you don't really have any time for yourself, even if you think you are. So not only are you hitting like your morning workout through this, you're also getting the sunlight, getting the vitamin D in the morning. You're also being able to walk these neighborhoods that you're actively buying in and around to see what's going on or see new projects going on, right? You get to understand like what your mind is actually going through and give yourself some forced time to think, because you can only walk so fast, right?
Correct.
You got 2.5 miles. I don't care. Like you're walking, you're going to have some time to think about it, right? Would you say that, and kind of back to your point about you don't wake up at 4:30 in the morning anymore, would you say that there is, like, have you noticed for yourself, it sounds like you have, that you kind of have like your genius zone, so to speak? Me personally, like mine is first thing in the morning. I do enjoy waking up way before the sun comes up, no matter what time of the year it is, because that's my time when it's calm. That's when I feel like it's really peaceful everywhere. Like not just not just in the business, but everywhere. I get the birds chirping when the sun starts to come up, and it just gives me my time to meditate and to like get my day going. But that's my genius zone. For a lot of people, it goes at different times. For you, it sounds like it's in the mid-morning. Would you say you found that?
Yeah, I would say without a doubt, it happens in the morning for sure. And like, for me, like everybody has like their sweet spot of when, because like I'm sure this will change, right? Because I'm going to have a baby next
Yeah.
week, so I'm sure like I will start waking up at 4:30 again to just create more time in a day
Right.
for that thought. But for now, like I was just too groggy, and I like if I always think if I was retired, right? Like what would my life look like? I'd wake up kind of as the sun wakes up, like
Yep.
naturally, they
Yep.
get that circadian rhythm, like everything's hitting, right? I don't have that luxury right now. So like I wake up about an hour before that, but undoubtedly my best thought is in the morning. And admittedly, I probably think too much.
Yep. Yep.
I'm a dreamer. I'm always thinking. Like if I'm not in perfect flow state throughout the day, I just get aggravated because a lot of what I do is project based to make sure the company takes that project and goes and executes, right? So, but it works for me.
So you basically always have to be envisioning and dreaming about what the opportunities ahead are, what the obstacles are that are coming up that you're going to have to battle, right?
1,000%.
So what are you doing now? What are you focused on now when you're actively walking and thinking about what those obstacles might be, or thinking about the projects that you're actively working on? Give us a background of what that looks like.
Yeah, so like a lot of what I think about, it's not necessarily like operationally focused.
Okay.
Like I'll give you an example. Like I'm trying to raise money for one of our large development projects. So when I'm out walking, I'm not thinking about how am I going to conquer this? It's more like way forward thinking. So it's hard to give an example, but so like for us, like in our business, everything funnels down to acquisitions, right? Whether I'm finding a big piece of dirt to build on, whether I'm finding a house to flip, a great seller finance deal, it all funnels down to how do we go and be efficient in the acquisition process. So for me, and that's kind of like, that's my genius, my passion is how do I go and find targets to go after. So when I'm out there walking and thinking, it's more along those lines. Not necessarily like operational issues.
Okay. Bigger picture items is what you're
Bigger
trying to think
picture
about.
items, correct.
So talking about bigger picture items, I mean, what about the macroeconomics that are going on in our world today, when it comes to interest rates and inflation, things like this? Are you thinking about that when it comes to what your big picture is, and how is that relating today?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it's very applicable on the development side because when you go out and buy a piece of dirt, you build it, you develop the land, you build the structures, all that stuff. You can't go build at a discount, right? The costs are the costs. So you have to be extremely certain that you're going to be completing that project in a favorable environment. And it's all a gamble at the same time. Developers by virtue are gamblers because if you build and exit in the wrong time period, it will decimate somebody. But if you do it correctly and your bet is right, you'll be infinitely wealthy. So it's very applicable on the new development side. It's less applicable on, I'm going to go try to buy a house for extremely cheap because you're defying laws of the free market, right? You're getting somebody to agree to a price significantly under what the fair market value is. So it's less applicable there.
Right. So, I mean, explain how that feels today, right? We're sitting in an interest rate environment that's 7%, call it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, if we look back in history, that's not high. 7% is not a high interest rate. If we're talking about residential real estate, it's not a high thing. But what is high is the sales price of the house. So that's the big kicker. That's the big issue. And so I guess we could go two different ways because if we're talking about just residential single-family housing, it's drastically different than what you're talking about on the development side, right?
Correct.
So let's talk about it in two different ways. When it comes to the residential single-family housing market, what do you think the impact of this interest rate environment with the inflation that we have is? And if we're looking the next 12 months, how do you think it's going to be impacted? Or what do you think is going to change?
I think it's the same story as the COVID story, right? Because think about when COVID hit and everybody was sitting back just to wait to see what kind of unfolded before they did something, buy a house. Same thing today, right? Nobody wants to go and buy a house when they think interest rates might, because we're at all-time high, right?
Right.
Nobody wants to buy a house. Like, okay, people are buying houses because they need housing, but the people who have a choice, they're not, they're sitting on the sidelines. So I think when you start to see a downward pattern on rates, that's when all that pent-up demand, very similar to the pent-up demand that we saw during COVID, I think we're going to have a real estate boom 3.0. Because if you think about it, we haven't really had a meaningful recession since 07, 08. So we had obviously the real estate, I call it, this is my own kind of terminology, the real estate boom 1.0, which was like 08 to, call it 2018.
Yep.
And then COVID, there was some very,
temporary.
Very temporary.
Yeah.
But that was real estate boom 2.0 without, okay, you could argue a recession, right? But I'll call it real estate boom 2.0. And then let's say, I don't think we're going to have a housing recession during this we may have a recession in other areas of the economy, but I don't think during housing unless something drastically happens. But once the interest rates, I believe, start to trend downwards, we're going to be in that 3.0 era.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's interesting because, we have a shortage of housing in Phoenix. Now they're definitely building, right? On the apartment side, right? And even on the single family building side.
And I think even the builders recognize this as well because the big publics like Lennar and KB and Pulte, all these guys, they want to double their land position in the next 5 years. If you really think about that, like you're going to look at all their land holdings. I don't know the exact number, but If you want to double in 5 years, these are Wall Street backed, publicly traded companies. They know what's coming. So they want to increase their land position because, in my mind, they're prepping for this 3.0 boom.
Yeah, especially with all the people that are moving. So Phoenix, I feel like, is also very insulated, right? We have some of the largest developments going on outside of, there's the big microchip plant that's going in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a massive, a 30-year plan that they're trying to put together with that, and that's bringing so many jobs to the state of Arizona, and all those people need somewhere to live, right?
That's exactly.
They need somewhere to live, and that's just going to make the west side of the valley just grow like crazy because it already is, right? There's a lot of new. Watching the Cromford Report, which those of you listening that are not in Phoenix, it's probably one of the hidden tools that we have here in Phoenix. Cromford Report is talking about, that the west side has so much new development that's going on because they're prepping for all those jobs that are coming. They're prepping for all the ancillary jobs that come with it, right? Because using just the power plant or the chip plant as one example, those people need somewhere to take their clothes to get, dry clean. They need to have fast food. They need to have restaurants. They need to have grocery stores. They need to have all the places to buy their cars and get their cars worked on, all the different aspects of living somewhere, right?
No, absolutely. And I actually drove, where did I drive? I drove to Buckeye yesterday. Anyways. And I haven't driven out west that far in a couple years. And there's a Costco, a random Costco, nothing around it, off the freeway there, on the way to Buckeye, and I'm like, holy crap, this is primed to just have that growth just continue west. And if you really think about it, Buckeye, yeah, it's a great candidate because there's so much land out there. It's that's the only available land is West Valley. Yeah, you have Queen Creek, stuff like that, but it's all trending.
It's
west.
all going that way, and it's almost the bridge to go to California as well as we keep
Correct.
Going west. And it is mind-blowing. I have not driven out there. Maybe I should. And especially a place like Costco, they've done their due diligence. Mm-hmm. They know that by putting a Costco there, it's gonna produce, right?
Correct.
Looking at large employers or large organizations like that as good metrics as to where to invest in is probably a good idea.
Yeah, it's similar to how developers, their whole business model is building within a 5-mile radius of a Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm.
It's Whole Foods have done their diligence. Whole Foods is in predominantly wealthy and well-capitalized districts and stuff like that. So, of course.
So let's talk about the development side now. How do you feel like this is going to affect on the development side? Kind of along the same road, right? You're developing with a number in mind. But because we're having population growth and people that are moving here, you'll probably be able to hit that. What about cost? How are you adjusting for the inflated costs that we've had over the last couple of years and making sure that you have that priced in correctly?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when you're in the pre-development phase and you're getting ready to break ground and you're putting together all your budgets, development and the vertical construction, you do the best that you can, but you really there's a reason why developers, either make a lot of money or they make no money, because you have to do so much diligence before you break ground, or it could break you. Like a good example is we're building 69 houses just south of Arcadia Light, and we had our when we got the project entitled, meaning we got the engineered lots platted, approved by the city, all the underground infrastructure was approved, storm, water, sewer, all these components, right? And we're relying on the city to give us accurate, as-builts of what to connect into. So when we're digging into the road, all that shit was wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So we had to go back and redesign everything. And then we had to elevate the site a couple, 12 in. So anyways, long story short, you can't plan for everything. The most you could do is do your diligence as deep as you could go, put a healthy contingency line item in there, and just hope it all works out.
When you talk about risk management on the development side, do you build in a buffer from your expense load and what you're kind of hoping for that? Or I get it, it's probably not going to go as planned, because I don't know about you, but every time we do even a simple remodel, it never goes as planned for the most part, right? Correct. So even a whole development is probably quite a bit worse than that. But how do you plan for that? And what is your risk mitigation strategy when it comes to comes even from a small flip to even that big development? I mean, how are you doing that?
It's a lot easier on the flip side, because you don't have outside influence that is influencing decisions that are being made on a flip. Like it's a house, unless you run into a city inspector, but typically we don't, right? Yeah. You have a house, go inside, punch a couple holes in the wall, see what's going on, that's it. But on the development side, you have 3 levels of risk, and there's really 3 stages of development. You have entitlement, which is taking a raw piece of land and getting your project approved by the city. That's phase 1. That's pre-development. There's risks in there. Then you have land development, which is getting the land prepped, all the underground infrastructure, put in, all that stuff. Then you actually have the physical construction of the structures. Okay. That's the least risky part of the project, because you're building a house, right? You know what it takes to put a couple sticks together and go vertical. But so you have these 3 different risk factors. Entitlement risk, it's a serious risk, because you have, like I said, outside influence. You have neighbors who want to see, who may have a different vision than you have. You're trying to, keep the neighbors happy, but also keep the politicians happy. And you're playing this back and forth cat and mouse game to try and land on a solution that still is economically feasible, right? Then you actually have going underground and then digging stuff up and running into issues, because, like I said, you don't really know where the utilities are coming in unless you pothole the street before and get underground and figure it out. But yeah, so you're putting in a contingency line on the pre-development, on the actual development, and then on the actual construction.
Is it common for somebody, if a developer's to go in there and only do phase 1, where they go and they acquire a piece of raw land and then turn around and sell it to a developer to go into phase 2? Is that common?
1,000%. There's a lot of money in flipping entitled deals.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, let's say you are talking with a seller they own 50 acres in Maricopa. You're not going to go build, 100 houses in Maricopa, but you got a great deal, right? And you bought that land for what it's worth, knowing that you could upzone it to a higher density and therefore force the value creation. So you have people out there that will go and get land, entitle it, and flip it for 3 or 4 times of what they bought the deal for. So if you're talking a $5 million piece of land, they spend $1 million in entitlements and they go flip it for $8, $9, $10 million. Great business model.
Not a bad return.
Not a bad return. Then you also have guys who will take it a step further and do the developments. So remember, I don't know if you remember back in 2009, 10, 11, you saw these abandoned subdivisions. Like the masonry walls were up, the streets were in, but you had dirt lots. That's called a finished. That's a finished lot project essentially. So all you have to do is, so you're essentially building out the subdivision, but you're not building the structure.
You're putting in the roads, you're putting in the sewer, you're putting in the connections, electricity, all the different stuff, just not building the house.
Correct. And then you're selling lots off to developers. So like, let's say you have a contract with Lennar, KB, DR Horton, these guys, and you put a contract together that says, I will buy 10 houses per month for the next 6 months. Like, okay, I got DR Horton locked in. You do the same thing over here. So as the land is getting developed and the lots are prepped and ready to go, now you're selling off lots to these home builders.
So of the 3 different phases, we'll call it, right? I mean, why do all 3? Why would you want to go? Obviously, if it goes well, right, your payoff is probably going to be the best to do all 3 in the end and ultimately make it take it all the way home, right?
Correct.
I mean, why would somebody only do the first phase? Or why would somebody only do the second phase? Or why would a builder only want to buy? Well, I can understand why a builder would want to buy the lots that are already subdivided and they just need to go in and build the sticks, right?
They just build the sticks.
It's really simple for them, right? But, I mean, why would somebody do 1 or 2? Or, why wouldn't...
Yeah, there's different step ups so you're forcing appreciation at each phase. So it just depends. Like it depends on your business model, right? Because
Sure.
my partner, he's a developer and a home builder, so it's within our business model to execute from soup to nuts. But like, say for example, where you don't have a production builder that you're partnering with, maybe you just do entitle and flip. Still great money, right?
Sure,
and not
sure.
a lot of capital outlay,
Right.
Because like what a lot of people don't know is if you're an entitle, if you tie up land, entitle it, and flip it. So most times you don't even have to close on the purchase of that dirt. So like, for example,
How long does the entitlement process take?
if it needs to get rezoned, you're probably talking 18 months.
Okay.
Because you have to rezone it and then entitle it simultaneously. But if it's already zoned, and you're just entitling, it'll probably take 8 to 10 months.
Okay.
In this environment. But like, the way we structure our agreements when we're going in to purchase land is, look, we need an 18-month close of escrow with 3 to 5 30-day extension options with extra earnest money hard. And that allows us to go in, do our entitlements, understand the risk, right? Understand like the political environment of what the neighbors in the city actually wants to see.
Sure.
Because like I've seen people buy land with the assumption of, oh, I'm going to get a 100 unit apartment building on here. And then when they go through the city's like, we don't want apartments here. Like that's not even, the general plan isn't even set up to allow apartments here. Like you got to stick to your 1 house per acre type of, and now they're screwed.
Their plan doesn't work.
Their plan doesn't work.
The whole reason they were doing it not going to pan out, which
Correct.
makes sense.
So like if you structure the deal that way, you're mitigating a ton of downside because you don't own the land. But the risk now becomes the cost of entitlements, which could be, $500 to $1 million on a sizable piece. Those are called pursuit costs, pursuit to get the project entitled. And so like $500 to $1 million to flip out of it and make, 2, 3, 4, 5, $6 million. If you're correct, if you think that there's going to be demand for it, it's a great return.
I mean, to me, it seems like somebody didn't do their due diligence when they were doing the entitlement work. Right?
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, if you make stupid moves like that, yeah, that's on you, right?
Yeah, and that's how the land environment was in COVID because it was a land grab in 2021 and through 2022, and people had, in order to buy land, there was no 12-month, 18-month close of escrow because it was so hot. So you had to be right.
Do you think that land plays are still a big play today? Like what asset classes do you feel like are the hot thing that are going on right now and that are going to be hot in the next 5 years? Well, when I'm talking about this, I'm specifically talking about Phoenix, Arizona, or the Phoenix MSA. For those of you that are listening that are outside of the Phoenix MSA, I probably can't be a good use of knowledge for you, but I'm talking about specifically here in Phoenix.
Specifically here in Phoenix, I do think it applies to every large MSA across the country, even though markets are different,
Drastically different.
But just from macro, just a macro standpoint, like we were talking about, we are undersupplied. People are hunkering down, and not a lot of houses are trading. So I think that's creating some pent up demand. So I think if forward looking, if you're an entitlement and flip type of guy, now's a great place to start identifying targets and getting into land deals. Hoping that once the project's fully entitled in 18 months, you kind of shoot out into a better environment. And then also single family housing. Single family housing's right. The thing is, like, everything is demand has been artificially compressed just due to high interest rates everywhere.
Right.
So you gotta place your bets now, but not get hurt in the process. You know what I mean? Because, like, if you're predicting that things are going to get better in 18 months, but it actually takes 36 months and you can't support the whole period to get to 36, you could get in trouble.
You can get creamed. I mean, I was kind of thinking of some scenarios during COVID. So, like, what I know now, right? If I would have known now knew then what I know now, I would have probably treated COVID in a different way, to be completely fair and honest. Because of the low interest rate environment at that point, I should have bought a lot more, put it on 30-year fixed notes at sub 4%, right? That was a smart thing to do instead of just recycling so many deals as we did, which was great because we made a ton of money. But looking at it from the long term, the 30-year play, it's like, well, I probably should have kept at least a third of the ones that I sold, right?
Correct.
But some people that didn't, because some people also got hit at the end, right? Like, they bought deals like right in 2022.
Speculative buying.
They were thinking like, hey, I'll buy it today. Maybe I'll put a small bridge loan or something, like variable rate or something, because they thought they were going to be able to refinance out of it and got stuck with them. Or, I'm sure a lot of people in this game, in the Airbnb game or the short-term rental game, that bought it based on the financials that an Airbnb was producing during the hot time. And after, once Airbnb kind of fell off, it was like, oh, now I can't support my mortgage, right?
Got clobbered.
What kind of advice do you give those people? I mean, do you think there's some shadow inventory still coming from that? Do you think that there's,
I think there's still inventory in the Airbnb space. I will not flip in Old Town right now because I got caught a couple different times when I thought it was safe. And all of a sudden, when I'm ready to list, there's a swath of inventory that just, 30, 40 houses that get listed within a 2-week period, and I just get clobbered.
Yep.
I do think, because when people think all over the country, right? When people think Airbnb, where they go to Scottsdale.
Right.
Like, it could be somebody from Minnesota
right.
or Scottsdale or New York. Like, it's for some reason Scottsdale is the place to whatever. I don't know where people got this idea.
It is pretty nice in certain times of the year. In South Scottsdale's, it's not bad.
Well, I mean, it is nice.
It is nice.
But I do think we have some backlog that we still need to get through in the Airbnb space.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting when you're driving through Scottsdale. You can just see it too. You can notice. You can like drive down a neighborhood and just on one street, it's like Airbnb. Yep, Airbnb. Yep. I mean, you can tell from the very beginning, right?
And I'm just not a fan of Airbnb. I feel like it destroys the community. You know what I mean?
Dude, I had 3 of them in 2018, and they just, for me, like, it was too much hands-on experience, and it cost too much to have somebody else manage it. They were charging me 20% to manage it, and I felt like every time somebody would leave, something would be broken or something would be missing or something. It was just a pain. Matter of fact, one of them in South Scottsdale, there's like an addition on it that we put a pool table in, right? Well, around the whole side of the addition is all windows, and for some reason they always got broken because people would, like, I guess, hit it with the pool stick and it would break a window almost every time. Mm-hmm. And so thankfully, I kind of saw the writing on the wall at that point and turned them all into long-term rentals.
Good.
But same thing. Like, I just wasn't a big fan. It's a lot of hands-on stuff.
Dude, it's just too much operational bullshit, And like, I bought 2 houses in Old Town right next door to each other, and I was thinking about converting them to Airbnb. This is like 2019 or something. And then I'm like, you know what? Screw it. Long term, everything. And, this is back when the times were good. Now, my yield was significantly larger long term than it was my buddies that were Airbnb-ing in Scottsdale.
When you look at it from an annual perspective, of course it is, right? Like, you might have a couple of, like, killer months, but then you got all these down months. Mm-hmm. And all the expenses. I mean, I think when people really look at a P&L, which I feel like, gosh, unfortunately, a lot of people don't look at a P&L. Mm-hmm. But when you look at the real expenses of an operation, you look at, like, what is your net number at the end of the day? The long term is still great. When everything is financed correctly and you're cash flowing the right way you're supposed to, it's you're not going to make a ton of money on one house, but when you get 20 to 50 or 100 of them, that's where it really becomes really cool.
That's when it becomes sexy. It's a boring game,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like the way I get through it is because, like, to your point, when you thought you should have, instead of selling all these homes, put cheap permanent debt on all these things, but it's just so tempting. You see that 50, 80, 100 grand rip on the back, and you're like, fuck, But
yeah, it does. It blinds you.
It
in a way.
really does blind you. And, I for whatever reason, my brain, if there's like 100 grand rip on there, sometimes, like, if I feel stressed out, I'm like, okay, like, what can I tap into or sell? But if I'm not, it's just, for me, I don't know. It's boring. The long-term rental game is boring as hell. But I tell myself, stay the course, because over time it'll get sexy, it'll pay off, and blah, blah, blah. And I was actually just talking with my wife, Danielle, yesterday at dinner, and she's like, these rentals are finally starting to become sexy. Because, like, we have, I don't know exactly how many rentals we have, but we have about 150 to 180 grand gross coming in every single month.
Yeah.
And we've had most of these rentals since 2020, and rents have gone up, and the perm is, whatever.
It's good permanent debt.
Good
right.
permanent debt. And it's like, okay, like, now it sucks. Like, to buy a rental, the first 1-2 years it sucks, because, like, it's razor thin margins, but
Right.
over time, that's where it gets good.
I mean, the rental rates are always going to go up over time, right? Like, we did notice at the beginning of this year, 2023, we saw some rents go down. Like, when we'd have some people, they'd re-sign a new lease. It's like we were either at the same rental rate we were before, or even dropping it like $50.
Yeah.
Not huge, but it's like, rents don't go up. The other thing, too, is people were thinking that the rents were going to go up the same values they were during the COVID scheme, right? Which didn't end up happening. They can't have that much rent growth. 3 to 5%, I think, is an average rent growth that you should expect over time every year. And if you're getting that, that's good. You're not going to see the double digits. Yeah, that's not real. So, in matter of fact, I mean, I was kind of looking at when is the best time to sell, right? And, like, this is a loaded question, kind of, or a loaded thing to talk about, because if you have good debt on something that's cash flowing and it's good debt, like these sub 4% is actually a huge asset today. Like, I have a really hard time selling them. I just have a really hard time. My thought process was, like, why don't I group 8 or 10 of them together? I'd sell them, take the equity, and go buy like a Starbucks on a hard corner. That's still an option. I just don't think it's an option today, right?
Correct.
Because, if a cap rate I'm going to get from a Starbucks is 5%, right, and you're going to get long-term debt and it's at 7, that's negative, right? You're already losing money. Doesn't matter how much, like, what type of debt you're putting on it, you're losing money.
Correct.
So I don't know. It's kind of like right now I feel like I have to just kind of hold tight with things on my own personal rental portfolio to figure out, like, which way are things going to go. It's been kind of stagnant. Would you agree with that?
I would agree. I mean, we're still buying a lot of rentals on seller financing and doing some sub 2 stuff.
Because you're able to get that lower rate. If you're doing a sub 2, you're buying it on the lower rate.
Correct.
Or if you're getting into seller finance, you're getting a lower rate. I bought a fourplex in like right next to ASU at the end of last year, and the guy, I mean, it's basically 3.5% is what it comes out to be on seller financing for 10 years, right? I'll do that all day long because I know one thing, and it's a 10-year note, interest only for 10 years, and I owe $1,050,000 at the end of the 10 years. But from between now and 10 years from now, that property will be worth way more than $1 million. And
that $1 million will be worth less in 10 years.
100%. And actually, that's kind of a good segue. I was going to ask you, like, what do you think about the U.S. dollar? What do you think about the effect of the U.S. dollar, what inflation is doing to the U.S. dollar, and kind of how it correlates to debt?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I think a good way of looking at, the appreciation of real estate. I think you need to ask yourself the question, is it the asset appreciating, or is the dollar just worth significantly less? Is it the dollar getting demarked? And obviously the answer is the dollar is getting demarked, but I don't know. We're the freaking United States. Like, we're not going anywhere. I mean, of course, like, there's conspiracy theories of who actually controls the United States, but I guess from like a physical like country, we're not going anywhere. And I hope that we stay as the reserve currency across the world. But I just think the US dollar will continue to go down. Our spending is completely out of control. I think we're every 3 months we're adding $1 trillion to the deficit. I mean, think about it. We're so fucked up. Like our monetary and fiscal policy are completely opposite ends of each other. You have Jerome Powell trying to increase interest rates and kill demand, but at the same time, you have the government who can't control their spending. So I think what's going to happen is, and hopefully it doesn't happen, is we're going to hit a patch of stagflation, right?
Pretty scary.
Pretty scary. I mean, that could be a death for a lot of people.
100%.
Because like if you can't afford to go out and buy your groceries and like the gas in your car, like you're screwed. And at the same time, the reason why gas and groceries are so expensive is because the United States can't stop printing money. So it's, I think,
dude, it's a weird time.
Super weird time. Like you can't put a bet in this one. The only thing I'm betting right now is that the government won't have the ability to stop spending money. Therefore, I'm continuing to buy assets.
Well, what I was meaning by that is like the value of the dollar in your bank account, sitting in the bank, is continuously losing the value of that dollar every single day. But yet at the same time, if you're going to put debt on a property, you're buying a real asset like real estate, that's going to continue to go up in value no matter what, right? Like that's not devaluing. It's going to cost you more money to rent that or cost you more dollars to rent that as time goes on. But by having those assets that are continually growing in value, no matter whether it's the U.S. dollar, if a new currency comes and that's what we trade in, like the asset is the biggest, most important thing.
Agreed. Yeah. If savers are going to get clobbered.
Dude, they're just getting clobbered. Right. 100%. You should not have. So, for a long time, I was always like, oh, I want to have so much cash in the bank, right, to be able to be deployed. And I think there's a portion of it you should have,
sure. Yeah.
Right? Because you have to have, you have to have liquidity. You have to be able to pounce when there's a great opportunity. But there has to also be a limit, right? You have to kind of set your barriers of like, okay, how much is an applicable amount of money today that you should be able to set aside to sit on, right?
Absolutely. And, I'm like, and I applaud the people who have free and clear assets. You know what I mean? Like people who own their home free and clear, some of their rental portfolio free and clear. I think, where I'm at in my life is, obviously we're trying to grow. So because we're trying to grow, we need to lever up and then, play that whole game, right? But I mean, if you're leaving money in the bank account, I mean, think about it. Like if inflation was 7% one year and then 5% the following year, I mean, that's compounded.
100%.
Right?
That's compounded, yeah.
That's compound. It's not just like a 7 and a 5. No,
right.
Compound that off of the last, value. I mean, you're talking like a 30% hit, 30% haircut on the dollar that's been sitting in your savings in 2 years.
And they're just getting clobbered, right? Because their wages aren't going up in the same as inflation. They're not going up the same way as what inflation is cutting the value of the dollar. So they're, to your point, the groceries, the car, the gas, all of these expenses that they have continue to go up, but their wages aren't. And
exactly. So they need to essentially the moral of the story is get into hard assets.
Yeah.
Get into hard assets. Don't go into gold ETFs, right? Because that's
paper assets.
That's a derivative of the physical product and that can be manipulated. Get into the physical product.
Yeah,
gold,
right.
Real estate, stuff that like the way I think about it is, and it's kind of funny. I'm like, okay, to your point about the US dollar, I'm like, dude, is the US dollar fucked? And I'm like, okay, like what happens if what happens if there's no currency? Like what's left, right? Food, water, shelter, and then maybe some medium of value like gold.
Right.
So like for me, obviously the answer is real estate because everybody needs a roof over their head. And if I really have to barter, I have shelter to barter with.
100%. Yeah. And you become very wealthy in that aspect, right? I mean, what was it, 1971 when Nixon took the U.S. dollar off the gold standard? Now all of a sudden, there's no reason, like there really is no value. It's a
fiat currency.
It's a fiat currency. It's not real. It's actually not attached to anything. It's just the only reason the dollar has any value is because we've given it value, right? We've attached the value to the U.S. dollar. Now, when I look at the rest of the world, the U.S. dollar is performing way better than other currencies in the world. So that still leaves us to be preferred, right? Mm-hmm. That's why Other countries are still investing in the U.S. with U.S. dollars. Crude oil is still traded in U.S. dollars. But I know that China's fighting it. There's some other countries that are trying to fight that and get the currency moved. I don't know what they moved to, but
yeah, it's our adversaries. But if you really think about it, Chinese try to convert it to the yen as far as purchasing and trading oil. Thank God their economy's in a shit can. They're fucked. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, look at their real estate market.
Right.
No one's gonna sit in yen right now. It's like the lesser of the evils. The United States dollar is the least volatile currency out there, so will always be the reserve currency.
Well, and yeah, until that changes, right?
Until that changes, exactly.
Until that changes, because if we look at all the dynasties and all the large powers, superpowers over the last 500 years, Ray Dalio, I think, did a video.
Yeah. Every 100 years, the empire falls.
Yeah, it's like the changing times. I forget what the video is. Do you remember what that video is on YouTube? It's Ray Dalio's.
I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about?
There's a couple. You have Ray Dalio and you have this other dude. The other dude calls it the fourth turning. It's essentially every 100 year, statistically speaking, every 100 years an empire gets swapped out for a new one.
And so if we look at where the U.S. is at 200 years, we're way past due.
Way past due.
And
the telltale signs is civil war within the population.
Yep.
And then eventually something so destructive and impactful happens where everybody forgets like what they're fighting over. And then everybody comes together and we enter a new season.
Yeah. Now, I'm not a doom and gloom type of guy. Like, I'm super pumped about the real estate market. I'm excited to be in this business. I think this is one of the, if not the best business to be in. So let's kind of talk about how can an investor out there that's listening to this podcast now, how do they survive in today's market? Like, what are some like fundamental ideas that you can share that you would tell somebody to survive over the next 18 months or 5 years?
Yeah, so I think it's important to distinguish how many years they've been in the industry. If somebody's wanting to get into real estate now, I'd probably tell them don't do it because you have to be you got to know what the fuck you're doing right now to survive. But for people who've already been in it for 3, 5, 10 years, whatever, it's the obvious answers. Reduce your overhead as low as it will go, and just get scrappy. Get scrappy with, for us, we're getting really scrappy on the acquisition side. It's putting more legwork into identifying the targets of people who we believe will sell at a discount. So it's putting legwork into the acquisitions and getting assets for a very, very good discount.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we obviously have the choice of do we need liquidity, wholesale the deal? Are we flush with cash, flip it? Or if we have, if we're looking to add to the portfolio in a certain way, put it in the portfolio. But that's less common because I don't want to buy something on bridge, go to perm at 8%, only put in the portfolio if I'm buying on seller finance or some sort of subject to structure. But get really good at acquisitions. Because acquisitions, at the end of the day, you talk about pecking order within real estate. It's the person who controls and finds and controls that deal.
Dude, I've had that argument the entire time, and a lot of masterminds I've been part of over the last 10 years, and a lot of places and circles that I run around. People that have teams of people that are in the acquisition side, but they themselves aren't the pro at the acquisition. I think it's a failing model. Like, being a pro acquisitions person, I mean, that's where I've always been at, and that's what I enjoy to do. It's something somebody can't take away from you, and therefore you have a skill that you're able to always be able to find a solution.
Yeah, if you go bankrupt tomorrow, you could literally just go on Monsoon, find the foreclosure, start knocking doors, and you could rip $100,000 in like 14 days.
Yeah, you could be back there. Yeah, that's right. It's that simple. How do you feel like technology is shaping kind of our industry that we're in? Now, you had mentioned kind of before the call here, before the podcast, that you're working on something, right? I'm guessing it's an innovation and technology situation. Do you want to talk about that? And if not, then how do you feel like technology is shaping our industry?
Yeah, I think it's starting not with advent of AI, obviously, and AI has only been in existence for 2 years, I want to say, but I'm starting to see AI and other intelligent systems have applications in real estate. I actually know of a couple different startup companies that are applying these technologies to real estate. And I'll give you an example. So, well, I guess I'll talk about like what I'm thinking about creating. So there was the whole idea for this, and I'm a huge Twitter guy. Love Twitter. I get
and I hate Twitter. I don't get on Twitter ever. Like it's like I don't. It's too fast for me. Too many things going on.
Oh yeah. Well, okay. Yeah. On the news and political side, yes, but I like to follow very like large operators of real estate because they just put thought out there, and it's like, holy shit, that's a great thought, and it gets the juices flowing.
Sure.
But anyways, long story short, there's this guy I followed, and his post was like how I use AI to start a debt and credit fund. And I'm looking through, and this guy put together this AI system that was able to identify distressed debt and credit within the real estate market because he was a distressed debt and credit investor. Used to work on Wall Street, but he had some coding background, developed this crazy ass system. So I DM him. I'm like, hey, do you mind showing me the back end of this thing? He's like, sure. So we get on Zoom, and he's going through this system that essentially he has all these different crawlers that crawl court records, public recordings, newspapers, all this stuff. And he's using language learning models to extract information, the good information, compile it, ping tax records, pull in like enrich property level data and mortgages and stuff like that, and all compiles, and the good stuff flows to the top. And it's the system essentially says, out of 50,000 records in this database, here's the 100 you need to go after. And I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, and he built this entire thing. He's like, yeah, dude, I went to a conference, a distressed debt, Wall Street, dude, distressed debt and credit conference in Huntington Beach. And I saw this, they had the booth and everything, the vendors. And I'm like, I know that vendor. So he went into a software platform on the phone. He's like, oh yeah, I'm trying to go after that note. So he goes and talks to this dude. It's like a $5 million note attached to like an industrial building in like Connecticut or something. And he talks to the guy. He's like, hey, I know you have this note. I know this is going on, blah, 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 blah. And the guy's like, how the fuck did you know that? Like, I only know like 20% of that story. You know 100% of that. The guy ends up buying the $5 million note for $2.5 million, repositions it, flips it for $5 million, makes $2.5 million. And so I'm like, okay, if you're doing this because in real estate there's two different sides. You have the physical asset side, which we call the equity side, and you have the debt and credit side, which is the debt and credit side.
Right.
So if you're doing this on a debt and credit side, why not apply this to the equity side, the physical asset side? So that's essentially what I'm building is I'm replicating what he's doing, but I'm going 2 or 3 layers deeper to essentially aggregate all this data live in real time, and then have the data talk to each other in a certain way. And while that data's obviously it's going to spit out targets like, hey, you have this flag, this flag, this flag, backed up by this recording, this recording, this recording, go after it. But at the same time, there's going to be intelligence within that software that constantly pings the database to see if there's new flags that pop up in real time, which would tell you, hey, go after this. It's hot. Like, you go be the first guy talking with the seller and buy their house.
What's crazy is like the technology that you just talked about today, right? If you think about this 50 years ago, right, it would be like completely mind-blowing, right? It's pretty mind-blowing today, don't get me wrong. But this just goes to show that you have to use your brain today to really make big advances within this industry or within any industry, right? The tools are available to those that can think about how to put them together and ultimately use it as a tool in order for you to find what you're looking for.
Exactly.
Right? That's really cool. I guess next question, what is your involvement with like mastermind groups, coaches, mentors, things like that? Do you feel like that's a valuable part of your life, business?
It used to at the very beginning.
Sure.
Probably the first 50% of my career I was heavily involved. It's because you don't know what you don't know, right?
Right. Yep.
And now that I feel like I have all those relationships built, it's not really necessary, right? And like a lot of what I'm doing is completely different than what everybody else is doing, so I don't utilize them as much as I did at the very beginning. But if I ever have a question, I have those relationships built, and I can just pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, what do you think about this?
Absolutely. It's interesting. That's just an experience. It's a wisdom type of a thing, right? You were there at the beginning. You figured out mean, there's all different ways to skin a cat, so to speak, in this real estate investment space. You found your niche, you figured out what you're going after, and now you don't find the value in having these big groups when you have all these other ideas that aren't applicable to you.
Correct.
Dude, I feel the same way. I really do. It's been, I'm still involved in one, and it's really for the, it's a time for me to hang out with my friends that are in the group. That's ultimately what it comes down to being now,
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Not so much of how much you're going to learn there.
But of course, on the development side, I have an amazing mentor. There's no way I'd be doing what I'm doing without a mentor, right?
Right.
Because it's new. Like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, does any developer know what the hell they're doing?
You're right.
But on the single family side, it's it's a lot of what people talk about. These masterminds it's just not applicable.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at you're a high level thinker now, right? I mean, you're high level thinking about what the next big opportunity is, not how do I go and buy a house at a discount. That doesn't serve you, right? Where do you think that, let's talk about the future. What do you think the next 2 years look like? We might have an administration change, right? Let's talk about whether we do or whether we don't, or whether that even matters.
Yeah. I don't think it matters.
I don't think it matters.
I've come to the realization that no matter what I want or what within the political environment, it's not going to it doesn't fucking matter. Like
yeah.
You have multi-100-year families and possibly 1,000-year families that at the end of the day, it's up to them and it will never be up to us ever.
Yep.
So come to grips with that. That's cool. But as far as 2 years, I think we're going to. I honestly think nothing's going to change in 2 years.
Yeah.
I think we're going to stay exactly. Maybe there's some pullback in the rate, but I think, if we do start cutting rates, it's going to be 1 or 2, and they're just going to hold. Because again, pent up demand.
Yeah.
They
don't want the inflation to skyrocket again because it'll push. If they lower the rates, dude, it's going to be a frenzy.
It's going to be absolutely insane. And if housing makes up 30% of the CPI and rates start lowering, we're going to be right back to, it's like 1971, 72, 73. Like inflation ran up to 22%. Like, holy shit, start cutting, the interest rate ran up to 22%. They started cutting, but they cut too quick and then it shot up even more. So I think that's probably the hesitation, but I think it stays. I don't think anything changes in 2 years.
The best part is I don't know. I don't know if it will. Either way, we're going to keep moving forward though, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, those that are resilient to the market and just somebody that has their head down and makes sure they have their finger on the pulse and is always driving forward is somebody who's going to survive at the end of the day, right?
Correct.
One thing that I've learned in my career so far is that no matter whether it's good or whether it's bad, this too shall pass. It's never as good as you think it is. It's never as bad as you think
Correct.
it is, right?
Absolutely.
It just continues to move forward. And so if you continue striving and putting one foot in front of the other, you'll be okay.
I think you'll be okay. And this is actually a very good downtime to sharpen the axe. If you've been thinking about a business model change, now's the time. The way I look at it is prep for, what the market looks like at year 3. If it's really good, you're prepared. So I'm just using this time to tighten up the model.
Yeah, tighten up the model, maybe get some inefficiencies out of the way, look at your P&L a little bit tighter, look at the expense load a little bit tighter, sharpen your axe a little bit sharper to make sure that you're ready to pounce when an opportunity knocks. Mm-hmm. So, dude, Jared, it's been good to have you here, man. Do you have any last things you want to give to our listeners today?
I think I said pretty much everything.
Thank you for joining us on today's episode of the Invest This Podcast. I know you got at least one thing from this episode, so drop us a like and click the subscribe button so you don't miss the next one. If you have any questions, thoughts, or suggestions for future episodes, make sure to leave us a comment below. I love hearing from you.